Welcome to the Lazy Girl's Guide to Podcasting. If you want effective and actionable tips to simplify the overwhelm of launching and managing your podcast, then this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Verity Songon, podcast manager, launch strategist, and host of a Top 100 podcast. I'm really excited to have you here, so without further ado, let's dive into the episode.
Hello there, we are back for another episode of the Lazy Girl's Guide to Podcasting, and in this episode we are answering the question, can I swear in my podcast? Now, if you want the short version or the short answer, the answer is yes. So there you go. If you wanted the short answer, please don't turn off the podcast right now. But in theory, you can turn off the podcast right now because I've answered the question. Yes, you absolutely can swear in your podcast. It is your podcast. But let's actually dive a little bit deeper into this. Now, I'm not going to say a load of swear words. I'm not going to come out with a load of cuss words or whatever. But a couple of things that you need to be thinking about if you are going to include swear words within your podcast. First of all, think to yourself, who is your audience, and is that type of language, just cussing and swearing, is it appropriate for your audience? And I'm not going to give any examples here because I don't want to run with any stereotypes or whatever, but it's your podcast, you know your audience. If you are known within your audience for dropping the occasional or even the very frequent F-bomb, for example, or the C-bomb or whatever it is, then personally I would go with, yes, that's fine to swear in your podcast. It's particularly that you're known for swearing, there's no problem with that. If, however, you know that your audience is not used to you swearing, or they don't like swearing, or it's maybe just kind of frowned upon in that community, or it's not engaged with very well, then you might want to reconsider whether or not you include swear words. However, what I would say is if you are going to include swear words, it's not just considering your audience, but also considering you. If you're not somebody who naturally kind of swears, I drop the F-bomb. Anyone who knows me knows that I drop the F-bomb every second sentence. It feels like half the time. But that's just normal for me. So for me to swear when I'm talking online or whatever, that's just, people kind of come to expect it from me a little bit, I think, sometimes. But if that's not you, then don't feel like you have to swear just because, I don't know, it's what you feel like you should be doing. That's one thing that I've said over and over again on this podcast, is that you need to be comfortable with what you're putting out there, and you need to show up authentically and as yourself. Now, if you are swearing on your podcast, what you might notice in your podcast hosting platform is when you upload a podcast, or when you create your podcast right at the beginning, it actually asks you whether or not the language you use is explicit. And right at the beginning, you might have ticked yes, you might have ticked no. And what you can do is, if in 98% of your podcast episodes you don't swear, then it might be that you picked no to say that there isn't explicit content there. But then when you upload an individual episode, say you did say a swear word, then you can say on that individual episode, yes, you can tick the box saying, yes, there is explicit language. And what that does is it just makes sure that when the content goes through to the podcast directories, be it Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever, it comes up with that little E symbol just to show that there is explicit content within that particular episode. Now, a few people I've seen ask online, and they say, should I be saying that it's got explicit content? Will I be deranked or downgraded or whatever? And I think, to be perfectly honest with you, that's the wrong question to be asking. What you should really be asking yourself is, how much trust am I giving my audience, or how much trust am I taking away from my audience, or from my audience to me, if I don't say that there's explicit content within the episode, and then somebody's listening to it and they come across a swear word. Some people, my kids have heard swear words all the time, mainly from me, but some people really protect their kids from explicit language, and that's absolutely fine. We've done podcasts before, this is not a zone to judge any type of parenting whatsoever. But my point is that some parents can become incredibly upset if their children hear swear words. So they might have put a podcast episode on in good faith. There was no notification that there was going to be explicit language. They're listening to it in the car or in the kitchen with the kids, and then all of a sudden their kid runs in just as a word is said that the parents really don't want their kid to hear. And you've got to think, what is that going to do with the trust between your audience and you if you're not kind of notifying them of those expletives? So I think, when people ask, well, will I get deranked? Will I get downgraded? As I said, I think that's completely the wrong way of thinking about it. I mean, first of all, I haven't found any evidence to say that those episodes that are rated with explicit content do get deranked, whatever that even means, or devalued, whatever. But what I do think is really important is that you give the information to your audience who are listening to you that there are expletives. And, it might not even be to do with kids. We know that there are some adults, some young people, they get offended by swear words because, it's how we've been brought up. It's our experiences, it's our cultures, our religions, everything that makes us us will balance out how we deal with swear words. Like I said, some people can drop like literally whatever F-bomb, C-bomb, whatever around me and it just goes over my head. Whereas other people, they get genuinely offended, whether or not they're being spoken to directly or just in the vicinity where they hear swear words. So that's just something to bear in mind. But the key takeaway from this episode is, as I said, yes, you can absolutely swear in your podcast. There is no problem you swearing in your podcast if that feels right to you, if that's what you want to, that's what you want to do. It's super important that you do make sure that you mark your episodes as having expletive content when you upload it to your podcasting host and when it goes out to the podcast directories. And as I said, if you swear all the time in your episodes, you might just want to tick yes for the podcast generally, and then every episode goes out with a expletive little symbol next to it. Or if it's just in the odd episode, then you can do that episodically as well. But as I said, I don't think it's something that you need to get caught up about. I think there's wider debates around whether or not you should swear at all, and this isn't what this episode is about. It's just about saying yes, you can swear in your episodes if you want. And also, when people start saying, well, what range of swear words do I start do I start having to say that it's expletive? Because some people will think darn as a swear word, whereas I just don't. So, it's starting to think to yourself, and you know what, if you in your mind think something's a swear word, just mark it as expletive. I think, that's probably the better safe than sorry kind of way to go there. But that's the longer version of the answer. Short version, as I said, yes, you can absolutely swear in your podcast. So drop as many F-bombs or as many C-bombs, as many S-words as you want. Or do you know what? Keep it clean and keep them completely out if that is also working for you. I hope you found that useful. I hope you found that informative. Let me know, do you swear in your podcast episodes? Have you ever thought about marking your episodes as expletive? Does it bother you? Does it bother your audience? Or is it actually something that you really, really stay away from swearing because you don't like swearing in your episodes at all for fear of offending somebody, or you just don't feel it fits with your brand or whatever? I'd love to hear from you and get your opinions on that. So reach out to me on Instagram or Twitter at veritysongon. Let me know about your opinions on swearing in podcast episodes, and I will see you next time. Happy podcasting.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Lazy Girl's Guide to Podcasting. If you loved this episode, I think you'll love being on my email newsletter list, where I send out weekly podcasting tips to help you create, host and grow a podcast that you love. To join, go to veritysongon.com/newsletter or hit the link in the show notes. Until next time, happy podcasting.